Hi, I'm Jim with Eureka, Canada, and going to go through the setup of the VCS shelter. It's our portable or backcountry mosquito shelter for intents and purposes. You can buy the tarp separately for rain, shade conditions, and then there's the mesh room that clips in, which you'll see for bug protection. This is the size of the larger unit. All told, you're looking at maybe 3.5 kilos, 7.5 pounds. But this can be a lifesaver on many a trip. A lifesaver in the sense that it keeps you sane from the bugs. What you will see are two setup options. One is kind of a standard version where we will use poles and then staking it out into the ground. More traditional setup, and from that there's variations that you can come up with on your own. The other one that's becoming more popular is the ridgeline approach, and you'll see that it's in conjunction with trees and just a little quicker setup. But both work effectively, and like I say, you'll add your own modifications and variations to the setup. So we're going to do the setup, what I'll call the standard VCS setup, and I'm going to start with doing with the tarp. And in the standard setup, it's using some kind of poles, whether it's the poles that you can buy, which you'll see later in the video, or just finding some deadfall to use in place of poles. What you're going to do, find a site that works for you. Here we're fortunate enough, we're in some treed areas, so I do have trees lined up that I can tie off to, but this can also be done just in an open field. A couple little things that I've done. This is my well-used unit. I have pre-attached different tie-off or guy lines to the different points, and you'll see that during the setup, and it just makes your setup easier when you get to the site. Just have them pre-tied and leave them there when you pack it up. Now I'm just going to simply stretch it out in the desired area where I plan to pitch the tarp, and we'll go step by step through that. So I've got the tarp set, just kind of laid down more or less in the area that it will cover, and the two trees at either end. In this case we would be able to tie off to those, but assuming they weren't there, then it would just be using poles only. So I've got it laid out. As I mentioned, I already have guy lines attached to the two ends. You can tell the high points of the tarp are recognized where the seam is, and then the seam runs along the spine of the tarp, so that's going to be your high ridge line. So that's what you're looking for, and that's what I refer to as the ends. The other ones without the seam line are going to be the side points, and they'll be at a lower angle. So tarp's in place. In this setup I'm going to use the optional poles, but again we'll show you later in the video how you can also use deadfall. The key on the VCS 16, the pole or the deadfall branches that you'd use need to be 8 foot more or less in height, and on the slightly smaller VCS 13 they need to be 7 foot in height. So these are nesting poles, nesting aluminum poles. The weight's not too bad, and they actually will pack in with the rest of the gear. So build the pole as such. At this point, what I do, and each person might have their own little way of doing it, feed it through the grommet, stand it up at this point, and just to get an idea how far out you need to do your guy line stake, and then because it's the first pole, I just drop it back down. Make my stake insertion and get the guy line hooked up so we're ready for the setup when that time comes. So with the tarp, using poles and staking up but no use of trees, you're wanting to create at the one end a bit of a tripod. So you've got two guy lines fanning out in inverted V, and then the pole itself, so that it becomes self-standing. Obviously in a heavy wind conditions this is going to be a bit more difficult to do, and with two people makes it much easier. But this is the start at the one end. We'll now just follow the seam of the tarp, maintaining tension, and get to the opposite end and replicate this same tripod effect. And then we've got the basic shell of the tarp in position. So that's what we're going to do now. We've got the spine taut, we've got the second pole inserted and up, one of the guy lines out as a brace, and now we're going to do the second one as well. And again, we're able to use soil, we're able to get the stakes in the ground. You might not be so lucky, you may have to be tying off to rocks that you move into place, possibly to available stumps, roots. Just try not to damage anything as you do it. Making some of the final adjustments here to straighten the pole up. Okay, so the tarp is up at the both ends. Now it's just a simple process, stretching it out both sides and tying off. So the VCS tarps can be used just for those purposes, for rain protection, sun protection, without the mesh room if bugs are not a concern. So they do have multiple use purpose, as many tarps will. So you've got your two ends attached, you've got your two sides configured. You also have two lash or tie-off points along each spanning side of the tarp. Wind conditions being what they might be, just extra security to be able to handle that. I've also found two, again, deadfall pieces of wood, about a yard in length, 34 inch, so what are we talking about, 90 centimeter. And these are used at these points on either side. Basically, you can get something that can fit through the web and just kind of wedge it. Yeah, so the tarp is up, and now we're going to attach the mesh room. So this can be left attached, so when you do set the tarp up, the mesh room goes all up at the same time. But for showing how the tarp went up, we did it separately, and now the mesh room. As far as the mesh room goes, what you want to do is locate the zipper. There's going to be one at either end. Hence how you pack it up, makes it easy to find. And what you're going to do with these zippers, one in line with that pole, and the second one at the other end. Now for those of you who don't have any height issues, you can just reach up and make the clip. Otherwise you're going to have to cheat a little bit like me, just adjust the pole down so you can make, and these are side release buckle attachments, so right under here. And there's a little bit of adjustment that can be made, and then that attachment's all set and ready to go. Straighten my pole back into place. We're good. Again, what I like to do is follow down the center seam, attach the one center point, and then at the far end, same arrangement, just letting the pole flex down a little bit so I can access the clip, like so, straighten back up in place. Now there's remaining clips along each side, so one at the midpoint. One in the corner. Midpoint again. And then the same on the other side. So I've attached the mesh room at all the different clip locations, one at each peak, one at the center point, one at each side wing, and then one at the midpoint. So there's 9 locations in total, made those. Now you can stake out the base. When it's staked out properly, it'll create a square, and in the case of the VCS 16 that we've got here, it's going to be an 8.5 foot square, and in the smaller unit it'll be a 7 foot square. But basically grab the zipper, have it come down as vertical a line as possible. You've got 2 options as to loops that you can stake. Choose one. It's really just giving you which way you want the door to open. Make that attachment. I go to the far end. I do that because I can then kind of pull it relatively tight, line up this end the same. Zipper's coming down in a more or less vertical angle. Stake in, and then finish off on the 2 sides. As I said in the outset, these poles are optional, and most trips that I go on, I'm either tying off to trees, or if I need posts, I'm walking back, hiking into the bush, and finding deadfall. I know in the case of this, I need something about 8 feet tall. So if I'm fortunate enough, wishing I was 6 foot, but 6 foot, and then measuring it out, I'll snap off, or if I have a saw with me, cut off, again, deadfall. It's about 8 foot in height. And whereas the pole hooks into the grommet, what I'm going to do with the wooden pole is it's going to go and it'll use the web. So ideally, if you've got something with a bit of a notch, helps wonderfully. it can just be used in this format. So that's kind of using the more standard pole arrangement with the 2 guy line points on the end for your setup. Okay, in this setup of the VCS tarp system, I've actually got the mesh room already attached, and I can show it when it's up just what that involves, but it's very straightforward. But it allows you to set up the tarp and the mesh room all in one process. And unlike the other process, which is more the standard pole system, this is going to be a ridgeline concept, and this is to be used in conjunction with trees. So I've kind of got the tarp laid out in the direction I want it to eventually stand, and I've got trees lined up that will be tying off to the ridge lines. What I'm going to do, this cord is extra, it does not come with. It's just a lightweight nylon or lightweight polypropylene cord, and I'm going to run it, string it through the web, and all the webs, these are on the top side of the tarp. So there'll be 5 webs that I'm actually going to run it. With that optional cord, that's the kind of the neon green, you can see how I've threaded it through the webbing at each end of the peak and along the spine of the tarp, and then extended it out towards the 2 trees that I plan to tie off. I don't need to I'm still planning to use deadfall poles. These will be the 8-foot lengths for this one, 7-foot for the smaller VCS tarp. So what I'm going to do, rather than tying off at the 8-foot or 7-foot marks, I'll tie off lower down on the tree. But that's what I'm going to do now. And with one end, I won't be making any further adjustments, and I'll use this end as my adjustment end. So what I am going to do is get it fairly taut. And then I've still got some room to fool around with. Plus, if I need to, I will come back to this point here and loosen things off a little bit. But what I will do, what this allows you to do, one, it works with trees. You can have this ridge line already pre-rigged if you want, saving some steps. But now I can kind of position the tarp system on the site between the 2 trees, you know, that makes the most sense. Here, I don't have to worry too much about it because it's a nice flat area. But some places you're going to have a specific spot, so you just slide it along. And then once you've got that spot located, the way I like to do it is grab my pole. Again, I'll thread it into the web here at this end. Like so. Elevate it as required. Because you've got the ridge line already in place, it's holding it, making life a little bit easier for you in the setup. And now I have, well, there's a couple options I can do here. I can use the guy lines and stake out like so, or if I wanted, I could actually loosen it off and tie it down lower around the base of the tree. In this case, I am going to use the guy lines in the more traditional fashion. Okay, so one end's up. And now I'll slide that along. The second pull ready. Couple stakes. Same process. again, because the guy line or the ridge line rope is already on an angle, that allows it to add tension right away, making the final guy line setup a pretty simple process. And then lastly are the two side locations. Again, I've got sticks that I found in the bush, about a 36-inch, 90-centimeter long. Just have the web. You can get poles cut to size as well, should you wish to create your own pole kit. These branches aren't usually too hard to find. So same as in the standard pole setup, we've now used the ridge line for this system, but incorporated the poles. And final process is just again getting the zippers in a vertical line as best possible, using the loops provided, staking out. I'll do that at the other end, and then I'll move to the sides as well. So you've got zippers at each peak end. By the way, this is no-see-um mesh, so it's going to stop every biting insect. There's no-see-ums, black flies, mosquitoes, horse flies, deer flies, stable flies, you name them. In here too, you have a piece of fabric, sod cloth, we give that the terminology, and it lays, when it's properly set, lays flat on the ground. And that's for two reasons. One, it becomes a bigger barrier for crawling insects. And secondly, it allows you, if you're on sites where you can't be staking it in the corners and along the side, it allows you to put to position stones or rocks, logs, something to add some weight to the base of the structure. So that's what that's for. Interior-wise, you do have a hook right at the peak of the unit. You can hang a LED lantern inside. And in this model, again, it's a 8.5-foot measure, both directions. We've had as many as 8 adults in here, a husky dog in a single burner stove. We're using it with our what we call our stadium canoe seats. So the smaller version, which is the VCS13, exact same look, it'll just have measurements of 7 foot square. So I just know from comments from numerous people that these units have become the lifesavers on many a canoe or backpacking trip when the bugs are there.